All right, welcome to Gamification Weekly Report, where we bring you all the gamification, VR, AR, and game-based learning research from around the world. We read the journals so that you don't have to. Welcome to our first edition. Let's get moving. This week, we're looking at user-generated content in games, decreasing anxiety for learners using games, social justice gamification, games for addiction, surgery in VR, best VR and simulation platforms, and augmented reality first steps. That's a mouthful. Let's see where we can go. We're going to start off with a paper from 2017 by Kamra and Pitt at the University of Minnesota. They created a name called Differential Diagnosis Slot Machine, which allowed participants to generate cases for discussion in morning rounds. They tried different sessions in which they compared morning reports and the gamified version. By making a slot machine, you didn't know which kind of case was going to appear, and so the engagement level was really high in people that participated. The conclusion they come to is that game-based morning reports were rated as equivalent or better than traditional morning reports in self-rated categories. So in other words, if you're going to have students or learners present information, make a game of how they present it. Don't just have it drag on and on and on. Next paper we're looking at is Anxiety and Learning Performance and Gaming Performance. This was Yang and Chen doing work in 2018. How can we reduce learning anxiety? What they found in their study is they had high anxiety learners and they had them do learning and they had them do games. And what they showed effectively is that gaming performance can reduce anxiety in learners. So that is that we can take home our messages from this week, that we can use games to generate user content, and also we can reduce anxiety by permitting students to work in psychologically safe conditions. In other words, serious games enable relaxed learning. What's new in gamification this week? Let's look at the work of Thomas Wertenweiler at Lancaster University, January 2018, Serious Play and Social Empathy. What he did there is design something called the Fair Battles game that essentially was reported as a way of making socially equitable decisions. In the framework of this program, there was a new tone set that is important to feel for somebody else and to show empathy. This affected students that were not directly connected to the program. There was a certain vibe where unjust situations were seen in the game. There are other social justice games we should draw your attention to, very similar. Gamesforchange.org has a game called Syrian Journey, Active Social Justice. You start out playing the part of a Syrian refugee. You discover that Egypt is cheap but living conditions are poor, so you want to travel by sea. But you find that Turkey is more expensive but living conditions are better. You could reach Europe by land. This allows you to develop empathy. Both of these games have this common element of using gamification to produce empathy so we can understand each other. Good stuff for overcoming homophobia, racism, and all the other isms that plague humanity. Social justice games, keep them on the radar. Very big kind of 2000, 2018, and 19. Italy, Greece, Turkey, Syria, Libya, Egypt. Plan your escape route and learn to understand it. Next report is on the work of games for addiction. There's some great work coming out. We're going to follow up on this, but this is somebody named Daniel Greenberg, a physician that has a patent forward to move games to use recovery actions to rehearse and reinforce refusal language and to use verbal commands to say no to drugs in reality. In other words, there's an entire genre of games for the use of fentanyl and opiate addiction. There are over 100 people are dying in the U.S. a day from fentanyl overdoses, and so gamification seems to be promising. This is effectively connecting a computer with a digital display to a body interface device, and in Greenberg's model, we would have a game that would allow you to refuse drugs and also manage how you respond to cue imagery. That is, when you see a needle or drugs, how your heart rate increases and how you want to consume them. Gamification is just fantastic. Rounding out our work here in virtual reality this week, we're looking at the work of Andrew Davis at Leeds, 2018. Can you use virtual reality in the lectures? If you put on a set of goggles, you have some difficulty because the way your virtual reality works is that people put on their goggles and then they grab their cell phone, they go to a site, they then download the VR content, and the VR content plays through the goggles. And as you can see, they had all kinds of problem with device compatibility and storage limitations and physical size, button location, and screen brightness. In other words, you can't really use VR in lectures yet, but we're working on it. A bit of a tough go so far, lads, in Leeds. Some great work in Lilian and McGrath in Academic Emergency Medicine, October 2017, looking at the different types of realities of augmented, physical, virtual reality, and telepresence, and trying to look at where we can use them in emergency medicine teaching. How do you select a virtual platform to begin with? You have to decide the learning objectives, how much learners must be represented, patient and healthcare providers, automated or voiced by an actor, dynamic physiology, many things to look at. Here are the top virtual simulation platforms. If you want to freeze frame on this and refer to this later, be our guest. USC Standard Patent, SimTabs, iHuman Patients, Unity 3D, Second Life, CliniSpace, Hardcode, Immersion, and ScienceSpace. Keep an eye on ScienceSpace. These guys are up and coming. They have a completely immersive open world platform with quest entries. You can gamify almost anything and have them living in an open world. This is amazing stuff. And finally, surgery in VR, Pulijala 2018 for his Ph.D. thesis we had a look at. And that is that expert surgeons are starting to use VR surgery, and they really, really like this intervention. Surgeons, especially in the first year of their training, show very high improvements in confidence compared to second and third year. In other words, your surgeon should be using VR. An MIT thesis that he refers to as Gharibjanian in 2018, looking at Norman's design factors for VR learning and augmented learning. And we have to be always aware of visibility, feedback, affordance, mapping, constraints, and consistency. Lynn's product management framework in 2013 is referred to, where we look at the persona and solutions. And this leaves us to our last topic today. How do we start to make sense of AR? And we have 4 types of AR that we're interested in, and VR. We have wearable AR, mobile AR, and VR, and tethered VR. Wearable AR is a headset that you will wear about the world to give you in data. Mobile AR is something you use on a device. Mobile VR is plugging your smartphone into a headset and having a look at images. And tethered VR is using a lot of fancy equipment that you're seeing in retail operations at this point. That's it for this week on Gamification Report. We'll see you next week, and we do the reading and the literature so that you don't have to. Welcome back then.